Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Target Jobs webinar. Today, we are joined with the University of Law to deliver you a webinar on the LPC and the SQE and which you should maybe study this September if you are thinking about becoming a solicitor. So if you have any questions along those lines, do feel free to pop them down in the question box below. And when Jennifer and Peter have finished their talk, they will take the questions out of there and do their very best to answer them all. So just to start with, I will introduce Jennifer. Jennifer is just going into her third year studying at the University of Law. And we had a quick catch up before the webinar started, and she's considering doing a master's after she graduates next summer. So I will pass you over to Jennifer, and thank you all for joining again.
Thanks so much. So today we are very fortunate to be joined by the Deputy Vice Chancellor Law, Peter Crisp. So he read philosophy as an undergraduate before qualifying as a barrister at Chancery Bar, where he specialized in property and land law. He then transitioned into the legal education field, where he taught on both the GDL and bar courses at the BPP Law School. He served as the Dean and CEO of BPP Law School from 2003 to 2017, and his work in this role led to the BPP successfully receiving university status in 2013. Since joining the ULaw governance team, Peter has been involved in business development, apprenticeships, professional development programs, and he's also responsible for all of the ULaw campuses, including Hong Kong, which he set up in 2019. His significant experience in creating bespoke legal education programs makes him an expert in our topic today, choosing the LPC or the SQE. I will now hand over to Peter, who will begin by explaining exactly what these two courses are, and then we will discuss how to choose the right course for you before finally opening up to questions. Thanks, Peter.
Well, thanks, Jennifer, for those very warm words of welcome. Delighted to be here this afternoon to talk about the LPC and the SQE and the transition to those. I think the first thing I would say is that there is a major change taking place in how people will qualify as solicitors in England and Wales. And these are changes that the Solicitors Regulation Authority, the SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, have introduced, and it's a transitional period. So that's why it may be a little confusing for students who are considering what it is they can do and what they want to do. At the moment, the current traditional route is that everybody has to do what is called the legal practice course, the LPC. And at the moment, that's the compulsory stage of vocational education and training in order to become a solicitor. So in other words, in order to become a solicitor in England and Wales, everybody has to do a legal practice course. The legal practice course is validated by and regulated by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. So the SRA sets out the syllabus, the content, what you study, how many exams you do, and so on. So it's quite a highly structured, highly regulated program. So, for example, wherever you study the LPC, the legal practice course, whether you do it at the University of Law or at another institution, everybody will do 3 compulsory subjects. And those 3 compulsory subjects are business law and practice, property law and practice, and litigation, which some people call, as we do, dispute resolution, because it's not just litigation, it also includes alternative ways of solving disputes, such as mediation and arbitration, for example, but litigation, essentially. So wherever you do it, you have to do those 3 subjects. There's no choice in that. So everybody will study business, everybody will study property, everybody will study litigation. In the same way, everybody studies the skills. So skills are a compulsory element of a legal practice course. So everybody must study, obviously, legal writing, legal drafting, advocacy, interviewing and advising, and of course, legal research. Everybody also studies solicitors' accounts. So there's certain compulsory subjects that wherever you do the LPC, you have to study. The LPC also has built within it 3 elective subjects. So there are 3 options that you can choose. And this is the only part of the programme where students have a choice. We offer over 17 electives at the University of Law. So, for example, if you're going into high street practice, you might want to choose doing family law with us. You might choose immigration. You might choose personal injury, clinical negligence, and so on. Perhaps if you were going into a more corporate or city-type law firm, you might study mergers and acquisitions. You might study commercial property or commercial law, and so on. So there's a whole raft of elective subjects that you can choose to study if you're doing the legal practice course. And that obviously should reflect the type of law firm and the type of areas of law that you want to study. What this means is that anybody who has done the LPC has done exactly the same core as anybody else. but when they come to the electives, they've been able to tailor the programme to the sorts of areas of law that they want to go in. So that is, in a nutshell, is the LPC. I think the most important point to note about it is that if you do it, say, for example, at the University of Law, the assessments are written by the tutors who are teaching you, and they're marked by the tutors who are teaching you. If you do it at another institution, you don't do the University of Law assessments, obviously. You do the assessments written and designed and marked by the tutors who are teaching you at that institution. So each institution is independently validated by the SRA to teach, to deliver, and to assess the legal practice course. This program's been around for over a quarter of a century. I've known it for a long time. It's actually almost 30 years now, I think it is. Though I never did it, of course, because I'm a barrister. So I obviously did the bar course many years ago. But that in a nutshell is the LPC. So if you like, I don't think any questions have come in at the moment. I'll just double check. I don't think any questions have come in at the moment. But if you like, Jennifer, I can move on to sort of contrasting that with the SQE.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Slurp of tea. So the SQE, the Solicitor's Qualifying Examination, SQE. I'm afraid we live in a world of initialisms and acronyms, so LPC, SRA, SQE. So this is the new route to qualification that the SRA is introducing, and it's just starting now. And it's a big contrast and a big change to the current route of qualification, which is the legal practice course, the LPC. Very briefly, the SRA is moving to centrally set assessments, which means that if you do the SQE route, you won't sit the institution you're sitting at. So let's just say you're studying at the University of Law and you're studying the SQE with us. We will not be assessing the SQE. You will go to, it's Pearson VUE, so who do the driving tests and the tests around the country. You'll go to Pearson VUE and you will sit centrally set assessments that the SRA have set. And that's the enormous change. In other words, although the University of Law will be preparing you for those assessments, we won't actually be assessing you. The assessments are set centrally by the SRA, and essentially everybody sits the same set of assessments. So the SRA is radically changing the route to qualification through these centrally set assessments. The other big change is the nature of the assessments. There's two aspects to it. There's SQE1 and there's SQE2. Very briefly, SQE1 assesses what the SRA call the foundations of legal knowledge. So the foundations of legal knowledge, the basic legal knowledge that the SRA has determined that a solicitor needs to know on day one of qualification. So what do you need to know? The basic knowledge that you need. And very briefly, what that comprises is the compulsory subjects from the undergraduate law degree. So in fact, the things, Jennifer, that you've been studying, so contract law, tort, land law, equity and trusts, constitutional administrative law, criminal law, and so on. So the core subjects from the LLB, plus the three compulsory areas from the LPC, so business, property, and litigation in essence. So very simply, you're assessed in SQE1 on those foundations of knowledge. Now, the big contrast is the way that you're assessed, because on the LPC, the way we assess it here at the University of Law is through written exams, through courseworks, and so on. The SRA have chosen that you're only assessed through multiple choice questions. So SQE1 comprises nothing but hundreds, literally hundreds of multiple choice questions. So you'll be asked a multiple choice question on contract law. You'll be asked a multiple choice question on land law. You'll be asked a multiple choice question on conveyancing, on litigation, and so on. So it's quite a high pressured, to be honest, way of assessing people, because it's just multiple choice questions. SQE2, in contrast, is the skills area. So in SQE2, you're assessed in skills. So, for example, in legal research, in legal writing, in drafting, and so on. Again, they are done at Pearson VUE test centres, but of course, some of those are online, such as legal writing and drafting. But obviously, some, such as advocacy and interviewing and advising, will be done in person. So it would depend upon the nature of the assessment. So very simply, SQE1 knowledge areas, the basic knowledge that you need. Multiple choice questions, the skills assessed through a variety of different assessments. Would it be an opportunity just to sort of take the two questions that have come in? I don't know if you want to do that now, Jennifer.
Sure. Well, we've got some questions on essentially which is better and which one you should do. So I think before we answer those more
Okay,
specific questions, I think one of the questions a lot of us kind of worry about is how difficult the SQE exams are.
Yeah,
So,
that's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, how challenging are they? It's very difficult to tell at the moment because all we have at the moment is the results from SQE1, the national results, and that was around about 55% pass rate, so quite a low pass rate for SQE1, but it was very small numbers. And the type of student who was sitting that were not LPC students, because obviously people who can do the LPC are currently going to be doing the LPC. And frankly, that's my advice. If you're eligible to do the LPC, then my advice is do the LPC this September, because the SQE at the moment is a bit of an unknown. Although some students have now sat SQE2 as well, the results for those won't be out until August. So we'll know mid-August the results for those. I suspect that a lot of students will find doing 360 multiple choice questions actually quite challenging. So my advice at the moment is that if you're eligible to do the LPC, this is what I would do personally. This is not the University of Law's advice. This is my personal advice. Is I would probably do the LPC because it's something that it's a known quantity, and certainly, if you look at results of a recent survey of law firms, the vast majority of law firms are saying to their future trainees, do the LPC this September. Don't do the SQE. Law firms are going to transition to SQE next year, 2023. And then in 2024. So if you look at what the profession is doing, they're saying actually do the LPC this year. And I think that's probably sound advice, because as I say, the pass rate for the first round of SQE1 was about 55%, I think it was 54%, something like that. And we haven't got any results yet from SQE2, so we don't know how challenging students are going to find SQE2. So at the moment, I think the jury is out on how challenging it is. I mean, on the LPC at the University of Law, we get over a 90% pass rate. So students are highly successful on the legal practice course. It's tried and tested, and I think law firms really respect it, what they do, because it does prepare people very well for practice. I think the one big drawback of doing the SQE is that there's no options. There's no elective content. So, for example, you're going into high street practice and you want to have done some family law, you want to have done some immigration, you want to do some personal injury. None of that is covered by SQE, because I said SQE is just the foundations of legal knowledge, the core stuff from the LLB, and then the compulsory subjects from the LPC. So if you've just done SQE1, you know nothing about immigration law, nothing about personal injury, nothing about employment law or family law, whatever it was you wanted to do. And certainly if you're going into a city law firm, it's inconceivable that they would want you arriving on day one in the law firm knowing nothing, for example, about mergers and acquisitions, which is obviously for many city law firms is the bread and butter of the work that they do. So I think that's one of the drawbacks for considering SQE, was LPC, you've got choices within the options within the electives.
So thanks. I think that's a good time to add in a question here. So Maria has asked, which I think is kind of two questions. First of all, if she hasn't secured a training contract, should someone still do the LPC this year while it's still available? And I think the other part of that question is, if you haven't secured a training contract, is maybe doing the SQE better for future jobs, or?
Yeah. This is a very good question, because the heart of the question, I think, Maria, what you're asking is will there be training contracts available within the next couple of years? The answer to that, yes, there will be, because law firms will be offering training contracts over the next two to 3 years. The issue is at what point the training contracts cease and they're then replaced by the qualifying work experience, which I think, Jennifer, we're going to come on to in a moment, isn't it? Which is the compulsory stage of training on the job, as it were. I want to explain to people on the call that on the webinar that following the LPC, there's a compulsory 2 years of a training contract, which I think, as most people will know, you do within a law firm. And typically it's divided into 4 seats. So you might spend 1 seat doing commercial property, you might spend another seat doing employment. You move around the law firm, getting different experiences in different departments. That goes with the SQE, and it's replaced by qualifying work experience, which we're going to come on to talk about in a moment, which is much more flexible. But obviously, if you've done the LPC, then you have to do a training contract. So my advice is, if you haven't got a training contract at the moment, is do the LPC this year, because there will be training contracts available over the next 2 years. I think if we were running this webinar this time next year in 2023, my advice would be less certain. But this year I am confident that there will be training contracts available for the next 2 years. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. So why don't we? I do see the questions coming in, and we'll get to them. But I think it makes sense with what we were just speaking on to talk about exactly that. What is qualifying work experience under the SQE?
Yeah. So you have to do, just to explain, you've got to do SQE 1. Yeah, you've got to pass that, and then you sit SQE 2. And that's actually a rule. You can't sit SQE 2 until you've sat and passed SQE 1. So you have to get the results, successful results from SQE 1, then you sit SQE 2. In addition to that, you also have to have 2 years qualifying work experience. I'm afraid it's another initialism or acronym, QWE. In essence, this is equivalent to the training contract. I mean, it's very similar to the training contract in that it's 2 years, but it's much more flexible. You've got to do it in legal work and in a business that's doing the provision of legal services, but it doesn't have to be in a law firm. It doesn't have to be in a solicitor's firm. You could, in principle, do it in any business, or indeed in a charity, for example, that offered legal work and the provision of legal services. As long as when you're doing that work, you're developing your competence as a solicitor. So, for example, you could do it in a law centre. You could do it in a legal clinic in an academic institution. For example, the University of Law is offering qualifying work experience. We're guaranteeing at least 1 month's qualifying work experience, QWE, to every student who does one of our SQE master's programs. If you do one of our SQE master's programs with us, we guarantee you 1 month qualifying work experience, and that can count towards your qualifying the 2 years. It's 1 month gone. I think the reality is that most trainees will probably do most of their qualifying work experience in one institution. You can move around, and you can have up to 4 institutions, law firms, businesses, institutions, and so on, charities, for example, law centres, where you could do the qualifying work experience and build up a portfolio of it. I think most people will probably do it in 1 or 2, rather than moving around. But I think what the SRA wanted to do was to introduce a sort of maximum flexibility to people, so that they had this portfolio experience and this mosaic of different experiences doing qualifying work experience. Now, again, there's no minimum length of time for what qualifies. So in theory, you could just do a day's qualifying work experience. In fact, we thought at the University of Law that a month was the minimum that would be sensible. And I think most charities, businesses, law firms would say, that is right. So qualifying work experience, the replacement for the training contract, very similar in that you're getting on-the-job training and experience, but much more flexible than the current training contract regime.
Wonderful. So taking a look at these questions, I think it makes sense to start to move into the how do students choose section. I think it's so difficult to know what the right thing is.
I mean, how do they choose between LPC and SQE? Or well, I say, if you had started an LLB or a GDL by September last year, September 2021, you're entitled to do the LPC. So if you're currently on an LLB and you're currently doing a GDL, then you are allowed to do the LPC or the SQE. So you do have a choice. Obviously, if you started the LLB or GDL in January this year, you've got no choice. You've got to do the SQE. So it really depends upon your starting point. So Jennifer, you are able to do the LPC if you chose to do so. You could do it. My advice is, if you're eligible to do the LPC this September, I would choose the LPC. I think that's because, as I said earlier, it's a tried and tested route. It's well respected by the profession and law firms. It gives you the options that many law firms want, so you've got specialisms in the areas that the law firms practice in. And the pass rates are very solid. People get through. A student working consistently and efficiently will get through the LPC and will qualify. So that would be my advice. As I say, this time next year, we'll do a rain check, because obviously by that point, we'll have more results from SQE1 and we'll have our first set of results from SQE2. And also, law firms, as I said, are transitioning over the next 2 years. So most law firms will, this September, will be requiring their students to do the LPC.
Now, this isn't a question that's come up, but just out of curiosity, do you think there is a preference for law firms or employers on one or the other at this point?
Yeah, the clear steer that we have from the research that it was a survey done in conjunction with Legal Cheek, and most law firms were not going to switch to SQE until next year, 2023 or 2024. And I've got the data in front of me. 36% said they would do it in 23, 42% in 2024. Yeah. 18% said they'd switch in 2025. So we were seeing a sort of a pattern where, a third are doing it next year, a bit more than a third are doing it in 24, the remainder in 2025. I certainly think by 2025, nearly all law firms would have switched to SQE, which means that the training contracts will start to disappear by 2025, and it'll be qualifying work experience.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we should go over one or two other things before we take some questions.
Certainly.
One of the things, what are the costs and what about funding?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because perhaps we ought to go back to how do you study and how do you prepare for SQE1 and what are the costs of doing so. At the moment, the legal practice course, you can do it in London, you can do it around the country, and with the University of Law, you can do it online as well. So there's lots of options available for an LPC. We offer it part-time day, part-time evening, part-time weekend, and full-time. So there's a huge amount of flexibility and choice, I think, for an LPC, prospective LPC student. The University of Law, as Jennifer's we've got 15 campuses around the country. You can even do it in Hong Kong, should you be living in Hong Kong. So I think for the LPC student, there's a lot of choice, but it's also clear that you've got to do one, that you've got to do an LPC, and you've got to do it with a provider that is recognised and validated by the SRA, by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. The picture is much more fluid with the SQE, because the SRA is not saying to students how you should prepare for SQE1 or SQE2. It's entirely up to the individual student as to how they choose. So the SRA is not validating a particular preparation course for SQE1 or a particular preparation course for SQE2. So it's entirely up to the students as to how they decide to prepare for the SQE assessments. So in theory, if you wanted to, you could buy a lot of textbooks, go into a dark room and put a towel over your head and just study for SQE1. Now, I think the reality is that very, very few students would choose to study and prepare for a high stakes assessment such as SQE1 in that way. So most students are going to choose some sort of preparation course for both SQE1 and SQE2. My advice is to consider a provider which also offers additional content in addition to SQE1 and SQE2. Because as I said earlier, most law firms, and the University of Law works with over 60 law firms exclusively as a provider of the legal practice course, for example, most law firms do not want to lose the elective content from the LPC. If you're going into a city law firm, as I said earlier, it's inconceivable that you could turn up on day one knowing nothing about mergers and acquisitions, nothing about debt finance, banking, for example, because again, this is the bread and butter of any city law firm. Likewise, if you're going into a large high street practice, which does a lot of family law, how can you turn up on day one never having studied family law, or never knowing nothing about it, or know nothing about employment law or immigration and so on? And therefore, I think I would seriously consider choosing a provider that offers you both preparation for SQE1, for SQE2, but also this additional elective content. The University of Law, we call it our SQE Plus program, and other providers call it something else, but it's basically the additional content from the LPC. And we've put that together as a master's program. And that, of course, because it's a master's program, it attracts student loan company funding. So you may be entitled, you will be entitled to apply to the SLC to get funding for that program. Whereas if you just go to a provider that just does SQE1 prep or SQE2 prep, obviously there's no SLC funding available for that program. So that's two advantages of doing, say, a master's in SQE masters. You do preparation for SQE1, you do preparation for SQE2, you do the additional content that the profession and the law firms want, and you can apply for an SLC loan, a student loan as well. So that's quite attractive. The other thing, though, to bear in mind, of course, when you're looking at pricing and costs of all of this, is, of course, that because, for example, the University of Law is not assessing SQE1, yeah, you have to pay the SRA to sit SQE1. Yeah, I'm sorry about this. You have to pay the SRA to sit SQE1 and pay the SRA to sit SQE2 as well. So there are additional costs. The cost of SQE1 is £1,622.
Wow.
Yeah, so 1,622, and the cost of sitting SQE2 at the moment is 2,493. So it's basically £1,600 and £2,500. Yeah, so that's quite a lot of money on top. So you might want to think about where you study. Online might be an option for you, but I think you do need to do the maths on this and do the sums on this, because clearly on top of the whatever provider you choose, you've also got to pay the SRA's fees as well for sitting those assessments. So I hope that was clear to everybody.
I think so, yes. I think a question that kind of aligns with that is here, and it says, can I start the LPC this September while undergoing my master's program?
Okay, it depends what the question means. If you're doing the LPC, my advice is that's all you do. Yes, I mean, if you're doing it, particularly if you're doing it full time or even part time, it's a very full-on program, and it really is a demanding program, because you've got the 3 compulsories, the 5 skills, the additional elective content, and so on. You have to study, and so it is a very important program that you study and you give your full attention to. So my advice is, do not be doing something else on the side, like such as another master's degree. Yeah, if you're doing the LPC, that's all you should be doing if you are studying this September. Of course, many providers, or a few providers, such as the University of Law, also deliver the LPC as a master's program. So we also have the LPC available as a master's program. So you either can study more law with us, or you can do our master's program, which produces an LLM, or you can do business and finance and strategy as part of our program, and you end up with an MSc in business, in law, business and management. So there are a number of options in which you can do the LPC as a master's program. And obviously you do that in tandem, and obviously that program is designed and paced in order for you to qualify, in order for you to complete the LPC, but also to get your qualification, your master's qualification as well.
Wonderful. Okay, so do you want to keep taking some questions?
Yes, well, I mean, I think the one from Jemima was an interesting one. Sure. What if you do an LPC but can't secure a training contract over the next 2 years? So Jemima's asking us, I've done the LPC this September, I started this September, I completed and finished it successfully next summer, but over the next 2 years, I don't get a training contract. You can still do qualifying work experience, but at the moment, the SR are saying you've got to do SQE2, yeah? So you have to do the skills program, the skills element again, all of which in fact you will have done on the LPC, but they're requiring you to do SQE2. So I suppose that actually is one reason for choosing the LPC this September, because it keeps your options open, doesn't it? You can still do a training contract if one comes along in 2 years, over the next 2 years. But if you can't get a training contract, you can then switch to doing QWE by completing SQE2. Yeah.
That's a good one. And we have a question here from Anjola, who asked about the qualifying work experience. Does that take place alongside of the studying during the SQE prep courses?
That's a very good question, Anjola. It can do. I mean, to be clear, that under the SRA's regulations for the SQE, yes, you can do qualifying work experience before you start studying or afterwards and so on. In other words, because it's a sort of a mosaic or portfolio of experiences that can build a qualifying work experience, you could get qualifying work experience before you've actually started studying SQE. So there's no requirement about when you do it. I think, as I said earlier, I think the majority of trainees, the vast majority, will do the traditional route, which is doing the qualifying work experience after they've done SQE. But you could do it alongside. All I would say with that is I wouldn't underestimate at the moment the demands made by SQE or the demands of doing qualifying work experience. So if you're working full time and you're doing qualifying work experience and you're also studying part-time for the SQE, that's probably quite a heavy load. And it's not for me to say whether somebody's got the drive and the determination to do that or the capacity to do that, but I think that needs quite a lot of careful thought. And it's also the question of what your employer wants as well. I mean, that route is common for apprentices, and that's how apprentices study, of course. And we have a 5.5 year, 6 year apprenticeship route in which apprentices do exactly that. They are 4 days in the office and 1 day studying, and they sit SQE and so on. And obviously they get their qualifying work experience working and studying at the same time. But that's over a long period of time. I think, Angela, probably the question is, could you do that over 1 year or 2 years? Yes, you can. But the question is, what does your employer want to do? Yeah. And also, don't underestimate the demands of studying SQE.
Wonderful. So I think we've got a question here, kind of a more personal question, but you mentioned before about how there are electives with some of them. So Sumaya asks, students who want to go for criminal law, is there an advantage of one over the other? And we can extend that obviously to any particular form.
No, the answer in short, there isn't, because both the LPC route and the SQE route have criminal litigation as compulsory elements. So litigation and evidence, criminal litigation and evidence are compulsory on both LPC and SQE. What is missing, I suppose, from the SQE is, for example, our advanced criminal litigation module that we offer as an elective. So you do the basics of criminal litigation and evidence. You wouldn't do any advanced study, I suppose. So the LPC probably, if you're going into criminal practice, probably has a slight edge over the SQE, but you will study criminal litigation and evidence on both LPC and SQE.
Wonderful. Let's see here. So I think we answered Anasim's first question about preparation for both parts of the assessment and how to choose a provider, because I think we spoke on choosing when maybe you can get funding for, that kind of question. So I think we're good there.
I mean, the other thing I would say is you also look at your provider's employability service as well, because obviously if you come to the provider without a training contract, what's their employability rates like? Do people go to that provider, get good jobs? What support can they give you? And I think that's a really important one. Do they have good pro bono activities? Because again, if you're building up a CV, you want to make sure that you've got work experience, and pro bono is a fantastic way of getting it. As I say, we're offering every person who does an SQE Masters with us guaranteed qualifying work experience. That's also something that you could consider as well. So I think it's not just about the quality of the what happens in the classroom. I mean, that's important, obviously, really important. But it's also what happens outside of the classroom. So employability, pro bono, and so on.
Okay. So 2 questions here are just about international recognition. Do you know if either of these has recognition as a qualifying course outside of the UK?
Yes, I mean, some jurisdictions do recognise the LPC and SQE, but it will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I think Samaya's asked, will we qualify to work as solicitors in the Gulf after doing either of these? That will depend upon your employer, but the answer in brief is typically yes, you may well be able to work in the Gulf, having qualified as a solicitor in England and Wales. And there are lots of English solicitors practicing in other jurisdictions in other countries. Yeah.
Okay. And we have a question here from Temilolua, I hope I said that right, who asked, which is better for a foreign qualified solicitor with work experience from a common law jurisdiction?
That's an easy one, SQE. Yeah. So if you are a foreign qualified solicitor with work experience from a common law jurisdiction, then you should do the SQE. Yeah, absolutely. We have a special course at the University of Law designed for exactly that sort of candidate. It's a 40-week course. So it's designed for somebody who is working, say, full-time within a law firm, because they're a qualified lawyer already from another jurisdiction, and they can do our 40-week course. So we have a 40-week course designed specifically for that type of candidate. Yeah. So SQE is the answer for that one.
Okay. And Angola asks again, will the LPC be the same setup next September? So will it continue in its current form until it's rolled out?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in theory, the LPC could continue until 2032, which does seem an awfully long way off. I mean, a decade away. That's the sort of the long stop that the SRA have put in. I think the reality by that point, if the University of Law is still offering the LPC, which is probably won't be, it will be online. So at some point in the near future, Angela, what's going to happen is that the LPC will go entirely online because there won't be enough candidates to justify doing it face to face. I suspect that will happen after about 2026. Yeah, I suspect from that point onwards, it'll probably become an entirely online program. But I mean, who can tell? Certainly this September, it's available face to face, online, full time, part time. You know, it's running as normal this September. It'll be the same in September 2023, and probably almost certainly in September 2024. After that, it's harder to say. But yeah, but certainly for the next 2 to 3 years, it'll be available in person, face to face on campus. Absolutely.
Okay, so on that grounds, Sumaya just asks, so is the LPC safer than is the SQE safer than the LPC for students who are graduating next year?
If you're graduating next year, so you graduate from your LLB or in summer 2023. Again, my view is that the LPC still has a lot of currency in it, and I think because only about a third of law firms are transitioning next year, it will still be a safe bet to do the LPC in September 2023. Absolutely. But as I say, I think we'll run the webinar again next year, and we'll have more information by that stage to perhaps better to advise.
Okay, and so on that, Angela asks, can you explain a bit more about vacation schemes for the LPC?
Well, vacation schemes are run by law firms, and so essentially what it is an opportunity to spend a week or two, or sometimes only a matter of sometimes just a few days within a law firm, getting to know and under the skin of that law firm the type of work that they do. And nearly all large law firms offer some type of vacation experience. You have to apply for it, and it can be often, typically, particularly in popular law firms or in big law firms, it's quite competitive, but it is really valuable work experience. So I would certainly, if you can do a vacation scheme of some sort, it is fantastic work experience and looks great on your CV.
And is any of that work experience impacted by the SQE or the LPC?
No, not really, because law firms usually use work experience as some type of recruitment process. Yes, it's often part of the recruitment process. It isn't necessarily so. It will vary from law firm to law firm. Quite a lot of law firms use it part of their recruitment process. Yeah.
Okay, Oscar here asks, what about if you're a non-law student? Is there a better option then? And then how does the GDL affect the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the SRA are not telling people to do conversion courses. Yeah, so there's the moment if you're a history graduate or you've been studying maths or science, whatever, you've got to do some type of graduate diploma in law, and a number of programs available from institutions, including obviously from the University of Law. So you've got to do a GDL. Under the new SQE route, there is no requirement from the SRA that you do a GDL. However, in the survey that I sort of mentioned earlier, 85% of law firms who were surveyed, 85% said they would require non-law graduates to take a conversion course, to do a GDL of some sort.
Oh, okay.
So despite the fact the SRA is not making it compulsory anymore, it's optional, 85% of law firms are saying, no, actually, you should do this. And I think it's useful just to pause and reflect as to why law firms are saying that. The SRA is not saying don't do one. They're just saying it's not compulsory. So if you choose again to go into a darkened room and mug up a load of contract law and tort law, that's the matter for you. Again, I think most of us will find that it's easier to study contract, tort, land law, equity and trusts, either on a law degree or on some sort of formal GDL program. So the SRA is simply not prescribing how you prepare, but clearly in SQE1 you've got to be able to answer questions on contract law, on tort, and so on. Now, although we know SQE1 prep course will revise those areas, yeah, it's assuming that you come with that core knowledge, yeah. So if you haven't done an LLB, you haven't done a GDL, I think you will find an SQE1 preparation program quite challenging. Yeah. So I think, and clearly the profession is saying, do a GDL if you're a non-law student, a non-law graduate.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've got a great question here. Does online work experience count as qualifying work experience for the SQE, like virtual internships, or like Moses said, a virtual vacation scheme?
I've never been asked that question before, Jennifer, and I don't know the answer. My instinct is to say no, it doesn't, and it has to be in person. But I would need, I'm fairly confident that that is the correct answer, but it is something that I need to confirm. Yeah, so my instinct is to say no, you have to have an in-person placement, yeah, face-to-face placement, and that online experience does not count. But I will get back and double check that one, because it's a very interesting question. I've been asked before, because you're right, obviously, because obviously you could be doing, I suppose, online, work. I suppose during COVID, the answer must have been yes. If you're working from home, everybody was working online during the pandemic, whether you're a student, whether you're, somebody like me, a member of faculty in university, we were all working online. I certainly think that the SRA is expecting people to be working in person rather than, and you might have 2 days a week working at home, working from home, but I would expect they would expect you to be in the office. But that's an interesting question. I will double check. Could you do QWE 100% online? Yeah, very good question.
Right. Well, we'll add in another tricky question, which asks, can I do the qualifying work experience abroad?
Yes, you can. Yeah, it doesn't have to be done in this country. Yeah, in principle, it can be done anywhere, in the world. I mean, I think the reality is that most QWE will be done in England and Wales, but you could do it in Scotland, you could do it in Northern Ireland, and you could do it abroad. Yes, it doesn't have to be done in this country. No. What you do have to do, of course, is to get a solicitor to sign off and to recognise the qualifying work experience that you do. Yeah, so. Obviously, you've got to find a law firm that's prepared to recognise the work that you've done.
Which probably
so for example, a lot of students at the moment get their training contract experience abroad, or at least 6 months, because a number of large law firms, for example, offer a secondment. Yeah, so you can go to New York or to Hong Kong, or you could pre-COVID anyway. Before COVID, you could certainly spend 6 months abroad, working for your law firm abroad, and that would qualify as training contract. Likewise, people get secondments within industry and within sectors in this country. So, a law firm might well send you to a client for 3 months, yes, and you work for that client for 3 months. That again counts towards qualifying work experience. So it's actually quite flexible.
Great. Okay, so we've got another personal question here. So wanting some advice, an international student who's just about to finish the LLM, and they want to know if they should focus on getting a paralegal job or prepare to write the exams before getting the work experience. So kind of which comes first, starting the exams or starting the work experience?
Yeah. I think if you're entitled to the LPC, then I would start the LPC this September. If you're planning to do SQE, then I think it could be worthwhile getting work experience before you decide to sit SQE, because in fact the next sitting of SQE won't now be until, I think it's next November, so there is time to get some work experience in if you wanted to do so. But then of course you need to think about how you're going to prepare for SQE1 as well, and what sort of course you're going to do, whether you're going to do another master's degree and so on. It's also a question of funding, yes. So I think it's also a practical question. Are you going to have to get the paralegal job in order to fund your SQE studies as well? I suppose I'd want to speak to the individual concerned and find out a little bit more about their personal circumstances and also what their goals were and where you wanted to end up. But I mean, paralegal work, any legal work experience obviously enhances the CV.
Okay, so we don't have any new questions, but I do think a useful kind of segue would be, what is the kind of process, just ending this out, what is the process that happens for a student applying for these programs and securing the route, and how do they go about doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. The LPC is actually quite easy, because if you're going to do a full-time LPC, you have to apply through the Central Applications Board, the CAB, Central Applications Board. So if you search for CAB online, Central Applications Board, then you have to apply through them. So that's it's a little about the clearinghouse, a bit about UCAS. It's like the clearinghouse for legal practice courses and also for graduate diploma in law courses as well. So that's actually quite easy. It's a little bit more complicated for SQE because not all SQE providers are on law cabs for SQE. We are, but not everybody is. So the first thing you need to do is to select what program of SQE prep do I want to study and which provider do I want to do it with. So obviously, if you're choosing the University of Law and you decide to do our LLM SQE, you apply through law cabs in the way that you'd apply for the LPC. But if you choose a smaller provider that just doing an SQE1 prep course, then you'd probably apply direct to that provider. So it depends upon the provider and the course that you decide to do. So LPC, really easy. You go through law cabs, through the Central Applications Board. If it's SQE, it's a little more complicated. Choose your course, choose your provider, and then they will tell you how to apply.
Great. Before we finish, if anyone has any other questions, we've still got a few minutes, but Sumaya has asked, if we do the SQE, is doing the LLM irrelevant as you're studying some of the same modules over again? Does it make more sense to go directly from the LLB to the SQE? Okay,
well, just to be clear, at the University of Law, our LLM incorporates the SQE. So our LLM in legal practice incorporates SQE1 and SQE2 preparation. And during the program, you will sit and pass, one hopes, SQE1. And at the end of the course, you will sit and pass SQE2. That is the program. Plus, you'll do the SQE Plus content, which is the additional content, the elective content from the LPC as part of the LLM. So it's not irrelevant. It's actually quite important, I would say, for the reasons, firstly, that the profession wants you to do the additional content, and secondly, it can attract loan funding as a master's program. So if you do the LLB, you can move on to the LLM, onto an LLM that incorporates SQE1 and SQE2.
Great. And when you apply for the LPC, Angela wants to know if acceptance is based on your degree grade. And I think that's a good one for both the SQE and the LPC.
Yes, it is. So essentially, obviously, it will vary from provider to provider, but typically it's a minimum of a 2-2. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's the same for both the SQE and the LPC?
Well, it is for the LPC and it is for the SQE Masters. However, if you're just buying an SQE1 test prep from just so an online, say you're buying an online preparation course for SQE1, and you say you buy it from us, then there's no entry requirements. You're just buying a test prep course. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. It doesn't. Oh, we got another question here actually. With a foreign LLB, Kay asks, UK LLM and qualifying work experience taken abroad, would one be able to take the SQE? So
the answer in brief is yes, you would, because there's no requirement that you've got an English LLB. Yeah, so the SRA, you have to be a graduate, but it can mean any discipline. So the requirements for SQE, you must be a graduate. You have to pass an SQE1 and SQE2, and you have to have 2 years qualifying work experience. So those are the requirements. The fact that it's a foreign LLB makes no difference. That you've got qualifying work experience abroad, again, that is acceptable to the as far as the SRA is concerned. So yes, you would, on those brief facts, be eligible to do the SQE. Yes, you would.
Great. And Temi Lolua asks, if you already have an LLM in international commercial law, do you think doing the LLM combined with one of the practical courses is the right route, or is there a shorter or better route?
Okay, I suppose it depends where you want to end up. So if you want to end up in a city law firm and you want to be practicing commercial law or corporate law, then the answer, I think, is yes, do the University of Law LLM. So for example, Clifford Chance, that sends all its trainees to us exclusively for the legal practice course, and is going to do the same for the SQE, requires the students to do SQE1 and SQE2 plus the additional content, which leads to the master's degree. So it will depend upon what are your career aspirations. Where do you want to end up as a solicitor? there are shorter routes. Absolutely, you could just do SQE1 and you could just do an SQE2 preparation course without any additional content. But I think it will really depend upon what your career aspirations are. What sort of law firm do you want to end up practicing in? What are the areas of law that you want to practice in as well?
Great. Okay. I don't think there's any other questions that have come in. Is there any other information that you'd like to share to close on how students should choose or anything?
Yeah, I think I would reiterate my advice, my personal advice that I gave at the start, that if you're entitled to do the LPC this September, then I think that is probably the best route for most students. I mean, obviously there'll be exceptions to that, but I think the majority of students will probably choose to do the LPC because that's what the profession is doing. It's a very well tried and tested route. And as I say, the SQE at the moment is a bit of a gamble because it's an unknown, you know, and we've got no results from SQE2, so we don't know how challenging SQE2, the skills element, the skills assessments are. I think, you know, pick up the phone, speak to a careers advisor, you know, so at the University of Law, we have admissions advisors who can advise you on the best route. I mean, except for a lot of students, this is a bit of a confusing area. It is quite complex. LPC is quite simple in some ways. SQE is a complex area because there is so much choice. I think if you're following what the profession is going to do, the profession is going to transition from 2023 and 2024 and 2025. They're not transitioning this year, so there will be training contracts available for the next 2 or 3 years. Also, the profession at the moment appears to be requiring everybody who is a non-law graduate to do a conversion course. That seems to be another trend that's emerging. And they're asking people to do additional content, for example, our SQE Plus program, which covers stuff, you know, for example, that is currently on the LPC elective programs. So I think it's a question of looking at what law firms are doing. Where do I want to be in 3 years' time? You know, what sort of law firm do I want to be in? Do I want to be in a large city practicing corporate law or commercial law? Do I want to be in a smaller high street law firm doing family law? Do I want to do a specialism such as intellectual property? So where do I want to be? And then the sort of law firm that I want to be practicing in, what is that law firm asking its future trainees to arrive on day one of the training contract, qualifying work experience with? What sort of experiences do I need? What sort of knowledge do I need to bring? What sort of behaviors and skill sets do I need in order to be successful in that law firm and in that area of practice?
Great. So I think that we've got a couple more questions coming in right at the end here, but I think that answers Anjola's question that for an aspiring corporate lawyer, what would be their best route? I think it depends, right, on where do you want to practice and what are they looking for? Kay asks if they need a student visa as an international student for the LPC while living abroad.
Not if you're studying online, no. So if you're studying online, no, you don't. No.
Great. And Sumaya asks, as you said earlier, SQE is multiple choice, but isn't the problem-solving question a better way of assessing law students? So kind of
I would agree with Sumaya, but obviously the SQE was not my decision, it was the SRA's. So this is where we are. I think absolutely problem-solving approach is actually the best way to learn and to assess law. But the SRA have chosen this particular approach for a variety of good reasons, actually. We have no choice.
And I do think Anna Sim is right here to point out that SQE2 does have a skill-based component. So
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I suppose what Sumaya is asking is, isn't it better to integrate the two? So, for example, Jennifer, you've been doing some skills, haven't you, on the LLB? You know, when you do the LPC, we try to integrate the skills with the knowledge acquisition as well. And I think that's a really good approach. But the SRA, for very good reasons, have decided to separate the two. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions. So thank you very much, Peter, for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who came.
And thank you, Jennifer, for your expert questioning. Really good to chat with you. And hope everybody has a great afternoon and evening.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Peter.
Bye.
Bye.